I've got it! I've got it! Yes! No! Damn it, so close!
Hey, James, there's a spot open for laser tag. Do you want to go play that again?
Nah, I'm good. I'm playing this. Besides, aren't you banned for life since you stole their printer?
Oh, that's why they all look so angry at me. Right. What are you playing?
Well, it's like Tetris, but the pieces move sideways instead of down. I've been here for the last 20 minutes and I keep getting so close to winning the top prize. See, look at that. Last level and I can't quite get it. I will though.
Oh man, you are really close. I think you've been playing this longer than 20 minutes though. We got here at 11 a.m.
What time is it now?
11:30
Well, that's not too bad.
p.m.
Oh. Well, look, give me 3 more goes, and I'm telling you, we are going home with that top prize. It could change our life, Walt. We could be millionaires, reclining on a beach resort in Bali, being fanned by framed copies of Tropical Island. Tomorrow. I am so close.
Man, I don't know if it's because your eyes are kind of unfocused or you look like you're sweating Monster Energy drink, but I kind of believe you. What's the first prize?
An iPod Touch.
Oh, cool. Don't you have an iPhone?
It's about the glory, Walt. Oh. To be honest, after playing like those like arcade games quite a lot at Fortress in Melbourne,
Oh, yeah.
I have sweated Monster Energy drink at those things before. And the top prize is literally just like a drinks token for the bar.
It's amazing how invested you can get. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC and POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. Now, I remind you guys at the start of every single episode, if you want to support the incredible content that Walt and I are creating, then there is no better way to do so than at our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast and you can receive a ton of benefits. One of which is actually recommending an episode to the Space Commanders. That's at our very top tier if you want to be a Space Commander yourself. But even at the lower levels, there's amazing shout outs in the episodes.
Yep.
There's chances to like have us look over your decks. You can play with us on Spell Table. There's a bunch of really cool ways to get involved with the podcast. But we have actually received an email from the Space Commanders just recently, and they want more questions from you guys.
Yeah.
So they've actually asked us for, I'm assuming, a future command in the next couple of episodes. They want to survey you guys and get us to answer your questions. So there'll be like a Q&A episode coming up.
Yeah, so if you have any burning questions, anything you've wanted to know about me and James, whether it's be magic related or not magic related, you know, anything about us in general, I'm sure the Space Commanders would be happy to send us those questions and we'll answer them for you. So shoot them through. I guess probably the best ways would be either to email us or in the Discord server or just anywhere really that we link at the end of the episode or in the show notes. So Twitter, wherever you feel.
Yep.
Shoot us a question and we'll happily answer it.
Yeah, we don't control our social medias. It's always the Space Commanders behind the scenes. So we occasionally sneak on and log in, but they'll be collating all the data and they'll ask us the questions.
They will. They'll be filtering through. But we do have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from those Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Commander players are drawn to cards with powerful effects, but often those effects are not actually needed. Some decks would be better served by removing Win More cards.
Win more cards. This
Win
is
more.
something we haven't really tackled yet in any capacity.
No, not that I can think of. I guess, like, it's a term that we hear come up a lot in other formats, but not a lot in Commander.
I think that, like, for new listeners, hearing win more is probably a little bit misleading because win is a good thing,
Yes.
and more of a good thing has to be a good thing, right?
Right.
So like win more is actually considered a little bit of a negative term when we refer to
Yeah.
like particular cards, saying, "Oh, that's just a win more card." It's kind of demeaning to a card, I guess. It's like you're just a win more card.
Oh, and some people will get very defensive. Like, it's almost the ultimate insult you can throw at a card. Like, someone's like, "Oh, isn't that card kind of win more?" And you kind of go, "No,
It's amazing.
It's really good.
I've won so many games with this card. Yeah, I bet you have.
you were already winning."
Yeah.
So yeah, this is basically the origins of the term win more are in those 1v1 competitive formats like standard, like modern, that kind of thing. I don't know exactly when this term started getting thrown around, but it's definitely an old one. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah, on episodes like this, we've usually had like a cool little history segment of explaining where the phrase or the little like colloquialism come from. But we don't know this one.
No.
So if anyone does know where win more comes from, let us know.
I'd be interested to know if it's a Magic original term or if maybe it's from other sports as well. Or maybe people are kind of like, in baseball or something, we're like,
There's like a certain strategy.
That's a win more strategy.
Yeah.
Like, you're already winning. Anyway, yeah, I guess we should outline what it means when it comes to just Magic in general, and then we can go into Commander a bit later.
Yep.
So when I did a little bit of research, I read the command a little bit ahead of time.
I did see that the email said already opened, and I was like, who opened this email?
Yep,
Right,
no,
yeah, okay.
Walt
Makes
opened
sense.
that one up in advance, so he's ready for this topic. So the card that came up most often when I was sort of trawling the interwebs for some examples of win more cards is not a card that I've ever seen in Commander, to be honest. It's Curse of Stalked Prey.
I have a copy of this from memory, but I can't remember quite what it does.
Yeah, so it's a curse for 1 and a red. So enchants a player, and remember, curses are ones you normally put on your opponents, so it won't normally enchant you. Enchant player. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to enchanted player, put a +1 counter on that creature. So basically, the reason this is considered a win more card, again, this is in the context of 60 card 1v1 formats.
So yeah.
At the time in the game, when you are dealing combat damage to a player, because that's what it requires, right? You've got the curse. I'm playing, say, a red aggro deck. Yep. I'm trying to deal combat damage to you to get +1 counters on my creature. The argument basically goes, at the point in the game where I am dealing combat damage to you with my creatures...
Which means I can't block it.
Yes, for whatever reason you're not blocking. Maybe my creatures are too big, or maybe you don't have any creatures.
Sure.
At the point in the game when I'm starting to put +1 counters on my creatures, I'm already winning.
And this is where win more comes into play, is what you're saying. It's like if you're already hitting face and dealing damage, putting +1 counters on your creatures as a reward for that is just making you win more.
Yeah.
It's like that's probably faster, I guess.
Faster, yeah.
But like in this situation, the scenario that you're proposing with Curse of the Stalk Prey is if you're already doing damage to your opponent, you don't need to get those creatures any bigger. You just need to keep doing the same thing and you'll be winning.
Yeah, exactly right.
That makes a lot of sense.
So basically, like, this is the general standard of win more cards, is like at the time in the game when they start to be really effective, you're already winning.
Yeah, I think this is similar to a card that a phrase that we use in our deck building like template.
Mm-hmm.
We call cards that kind of accelerate us to winning positions. We've referred to them as enhancers before.
Yeah, and we've spoken before about how you shouldn't play too many of them for honestly a similar reason to the win more thing, right? Like, they don't do very much on their own, so only play a few of them. But I guess the difference for me when it comes to enhancers, and I'm interested to hear if you agree with this, is that an enhancer for me is a card that gets you from like an okay position to a winning position because it accelerates you ahead.
Yeah.
Whereas a win more card gets you from winning to winning more, right?
Yes, I would totally agree. I think in the deck building template, I referred to an enhancer as putting nitrous oxide in the fuel of your deck. And it like takes the engine and just blasts it forward. Like, I think that we'll go through maybe a couple of examples of like enhancers in our own decks later on. But I think that an enhancer is, something that takes you from like nearly there to getting over the line. It's like that little bump to get you over the fence. Whereas a win more card is you're already over the other line. At this point, you're just rubbing it in your opponent's face.
Well, I think we should discuss that a bit later because I do think win more cards can prolong games that are already over effectively.
Oh, okay, interesting.
We should talk about that a bit later for sure.
But do you want to talk about for a couple of examples of enhancers to like show the difference?
Differentiate, yeah, definitely. definitely. So in my Merrin of Clan Nel Toth deck, if you're not familiar with this deck, I just talked about all of my decks about 3 episodes ago, so you can go back and check that one out.
It's a good one, and I talk about them as well and say, A, how you can beat them, and B, why Walt is terrible at building decks. It was a very fun episode.
It was a fun episode, believe it or not, even for me, who was being bullied the whole time. So one of the cards in my Merrin of Clan Nel Toth deck is Winding Constrictor. So
this is a counters synergy, yeah?
Yeah, so my Merrin deck is a deck that tries to make things really, really large and then sacrifice them to Gerard Golgari Lichlord to drain all my opponents equal to the power. So basically Winding Constrictor does 2 things in my deck really well, but it enhances both of them. Either when I put +1 counters on stuff, it's going to put an extra counter on them. Mm-hmm. Winding Constrictor basically says if you put a counter on you or a permanent you control, put twice that many instead.
But it also says if you were to put one on you.
Yeah, so importantly, Merrin, when creatures you control die, you get an experience counter. And I've looked this up before, Winding Constrictor will give you an extra experience counter when things die. So,
that's sweet. It's like, it is the fuel to get you to a winning position quicker, because with your experience counters with Merrin, you can reanimate something at the end step if you have enough experience counters.
Yeah.
So in the early game, Winding Constrictor helps you get those experience counters and get creatures out of your graveyard and onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
But late game, it's really good because it accelerates the +1 counters synergies.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really cool card.
It does lots in the deck, for sure, but it is an enhancer, right?
Yep.
If I'm not sacrificing things to get experience counters, or I'm not putting +1 counters on my creatures, it doesn't do anything at all. So it's definitely an example of what we would call an enhancer, because it doesn't do anything on its own. It requires other things to work, but it makes those other things way better.
On its own, it's just like a 1/2
It's just like a
snake
2/3 or something.
Yeah.
Snake, for 2 mana.
What a cool card.
It's great in that deck if I have other things to do. And this is why we say only play a few enhancers. But yeah, it's not quite a win more card because I'm not already winning at the time when I'm starting to do those things.
Yeah,
right?
I guess thinking about my own decks, I guess Unwinding Clock in my Tornos list would be a good example of this. This basically allows me to untap all my artifacts. It's basically Seedborn Muse, but for artifacts only. So you untap all your artifacts in everyone's untap step. So my Tornos deck is kind of power balanced because it uses a really weird sub-theme of charge counters. It's a strategy or a mechanic that Wizards created to, like, say you have to charge up this artifact to get a really good activated ability. And usually you have to maybe, like, for example, Lux Cannon. You tap Lux Cannon to put a charge counter on it, and then it has another activated ability where you say tap, remove 3 charge counters, and you can destroy target permanent. Takes a really long time to charge Lux Cannon up. However, if you have Unwinding Clock, you're untapping that Lux Cannon on everyone's turn, and you can basically activate the destroy target permanent thing once every round, once every turn cycle.
Or slightly more than that even. Right?
If you have Tornos, you can double it as well.
Oh, yeah,
so
totally.
It's really, really, really strong. But think about Unwinding Clock on a board state with nothing on it. It does literally nothing.
Yeah.
But on a board state where I have maybe 1 or 2 artifacts that are like, okay, if I can activate them multiple times in a turn cycle, they become really, really good and help me get to that winning position a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. So it's a card, that once you have the board state for it, it accelerates you. Like you're saying, the nitrous oxide in your deck, it's shooting you ahead into the lead, but doesn't do anything on its own. But again, it's not an example of a win more card. It's definitely an enhancer. It's not a win more card because you're not already winning at the time that you're doing that, right? Like, it's not like you have like 20 charge counters on something and then you're killing something with it. It's like, no, this is the card that's going to get me those 20 charge counters.
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's a really hard thing to define the difference between an enhancer and a win more card. Basically, it is up to you to make the justification and the argument in your deck specifically. But I think there's probably like some questions we can ask ourselves to like help us define or help us determine if a card we're looking at is a win more card.
I think I'm totally with you. For me, I think the 2 questions would be, what does the card require in order for it to work as intended?
Sure, like what kind of board state, what kind of conditions.
And then basically, and this is where it's going to differentiate it from an enhancer, if those requirements are met, are you already winning? So that's what's going to be the difference. Because if we say apply these 2 questions to like your Unwinding Clock, right? What does the card require in order for it to work as intended? You have to have a board full of artifacts that you want to untap, you want to sink some mana into, or do something with.
And activate multiple times in a turn cycle, sure.
If you have that board state, so if those requirements are met, so you have those artifacts, you have all that stuff ready to go, are you already winning? No.
Not
in this
necessarily,
case.
yeah.
Because you might be, but you also might be at a state where you're getting there, but you need that little bit to get you over the line. But if we were to apply this to, say, that curse that we were talking about earlier...
What kind of board state do you need? Well, you need creatures that are unblocked and dealing combat damage to your opponent.
Yeah. And if those requirements are met, are you already winning? Yes.
If you're beating someone's face for like multiple turns in a row,
and they're not blocking you either,
you're winning that game.
Yeah,
like, let's say you've got a flyer and they don't have a flying block.
Yeah. You're in the lead.
They've got a clock, basically, on their life.
Yeah, exactly right. So I guess that's probably a good example. We talked about a couple of commander cards there, but definitely an understanding of what Win More is and how it pertains to 60 card formats. Let's talk about some Win More cards in Commander.
Because they exist. Sure they exist.
They do exist. I have linked an article in the show notes of this episode by Chase from Mana Curves.
Yep.
They wrote a really, really sweet... Oh, not Chase from Mana Curves. Chase, a.k.a. Mana Curves.
Curves.
They wrote a really sweet article for Star City Games on Win More cards in Commander. And their argument was basically that there's not really such obvious Win More cards in Commander because all of our decks are so different. They said there are probably cards in specific decks that are Win More in that deck.
Right.
So,
I get
like,
what you're saying.
an example of one of the cards they spoke about was Nyxbloom Ancient, actually. So this is the 7-mana creature that says if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. So there are times where this card will be that nitrous oxide, right? The enhancer that'll get you over the line.
I mean, in this term, it's giving you literally more fuel. This is quite on the nose. It's giving you 3 times as much fuel to use.
Yeah.
It's quite on the nose.
Yeah, 100%. But I guess the question I would ask of this card, and whether it's a Win More card in your deck, is what are you using that extra mana for? So, like, if you've got a spells deck, an X spells deck.
Yeah, big Hydra deck. Yeah.
Hydra deck, right? Nyxbloom Ancient in this deck, I don't know if you're playing it or not, but...
I don't, unfortunately. It's a little bit
It's very
too pricey.
expensive, yeah. But in that deck, this would be an enhancer, I would say, because you're just going to have more mana to sink into X spells. You're going to get more benefit from them, make bigger Hydras. Like, that's a really good outlet for that mana, right?
I also run Helix Pinnacle in that deck. That's sick win con.
There you go. That's going to get you to that win con faster. But if you're just like a regular, let's say you're a landfall deck, you're just like trying to get a bunch of lands into play, trying to ramp a bit. Nyxbloom Ancient, yes, it'll give you more mana, but what are you going to use the extra mana for?
Yeah.
Things you probably already were going to be winning with.
Well,
right?
let's say as well, like, let's say you've got like 8 lands, right, on the battlefield, and in your hand you've got a 6-drop and a 4-drop. If you're casting that 6-drop in your landfall deck, that 6-drop is probably like a Rampaging Balos.
Oh, yeah.
For example. That 6-drop is only going to be enhanced by having more lands hit the battlefield, not by having more mana available to you.
Yeah.
So casting that extra 4-drop doesn't really do anything in that situation. If you're casting that 6-drop and have a fetch land, or maybe have like a Cultivate or Wayfarer's Bubble on field or something like that to get a landfall trigger, Nyxbloom Ancient isn't helping you it's giving you a little bit of extra mana to do it, but like you're going to have so much wasted mana.
Yeah.
I think Nyxbloom Ancient's a great example because like you think about it in your deck, how often do you have, if you're running it, how often are you in situations where you have so much extra mana that you're doing nothing with?
Yeah.
If you're in that situation with this kind of card, because there are other cards like this, there's Mana Reflection, there's a bunch of different cards that give you tons of mana.
Yeah.
These cards are really win more if in your deck, you find yourself going, okay, well, I guess I'll lose all that mana when I go to combat, and then I'll go to swing, and like, you're like, okay, well, in my X deck, in my X-Tribal, like X-Typal deck, if I cast a huge X spell, I'm using all of that mana. There's no reason I shouldn't use all that mana.
If you have like a Pull from Tomorrow in your hand, you're not going to draw less cards.
I'm going to draw 80 cards.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm going to do.
He will draw more cards than he has in his library.
Do I have a Laboratory Maniac in the deck? No, I don't.
I just want the cards! Yeah, totally. But yeah, that's, I think, an example of, in a particular kind of deck, Nyxbloom Ancient is win more. In a very, very different kind of a deck, honestly, I think a card like Thousand Year Storm?
Yeah, this is a card that I'm a huge fan of because it fits. We just did an episode recently where we built a Spellslinger archetype.
Oh yeah,
and
right in a deck like that.
Love Spellslinger archetypes, but Thousand Year Storm in like an average deck, for context, it's 4 blue and a red, it's an enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant or sorcery spell you've cast this turn, you can choose new copies. So it's Storm for only instants and sorceries, and it only counts instants and sorceries as the backdated casts.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a weird card.
It's a bit of a weird card. The thing is, like, there are times where this will be the thing that gets you over the line. But the question you have to ask yourself, again, like those two questions before, if you reach the requirements for this card for it to work as intended, so for Thousand Year Storm, what would that be? Probably loads of mana and a handful of really good spells.
The ability to cast multiple instants and sorceries on your turn would be the conditions that this card wants.
And that you'd want to copy as well, probably, right? Like, they want to be spells that are worth having lots of copies of. Maybe you want to even have Magecraft trigger or some sort of, like, whenever you cast instant or sorcery, deal a damage kind
Prowess
of thing.
creatures on the
Prowess
battlefield.
might do it. You want to have that kind of a board state. So at the time that you have that board state, are you already winning? I would argue most of the time with a Thousand Year Storm on the battlefield, you probably already had that game in the bag. If you have like 15 mana and a handful of really, really good spells and something that triggers whenever you cast a spell, you've probably already won anyway.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think this is the tricky thing to like define of... It does go in that strategy because it's saying, I want to copy big spells. I want to copy multiple instants and sorceries. So in a Spellslinger deck, you're like, of course I put this in the deck. But yeah, I think that first question of think about what it means to have this on the battlefield. What do you need for it to be good?
Yeah.
And if you're already doing it, you're probably already winning.
Yeah, straight up. I would also like to call out an entire card type as being win more.
If you touch artifacts...
I'm not touching artifacts. That would be very silly of me. They'd hang me in the comments for that, for sure. But Planeswalkers.
In Commander?
In Commander.
For sure.
I think, more. Like, just in general, there are obviously exceptions. There's some absolutely busted Planeswalkers in Commander. Teferi Master of Time, for instance, that just, like, upticks, does things every single turn. It's crazy good. But there are so many, and I actually, for this episode, went on EDH Rec and looked at the most played Planeswalkers in Commander, according to EDH Rec.
Interesting.
And there were some cards here, and I was like, surely no one's playing this. And then it's like, nope, in 20% of the decks that could have this card in them, sometimes
20%.
Well, so EDH Rec looks at how many of the decks it's legal in. So
and
both
available.
of these are quite color restrictive. So it's not like they're saying in 20% of all Commander decks. It's like 20% of, in this case, Teamer, green, blue, red Commander decks. They're playing this. That's still too high for this first card, by the way. So the first card here is Sarkhan Unbroken. So it's a Planeswalker Sarkhan. It's 2 green, blue, red. He enters with 4 loyalty. You can uptick him by 1 to draw a card, then add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool.
Wow, a 5 mana ramp spell.
Yeah,
cool.
That draws you 1 card. You can downtick by 2 to put a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. 5 mana for a 4/4 flyer is okay. Or you can pay 8 mana and search your library for any number of dragon creature cards and put them onto the battlefield. Not 8 mana, 8 loyalty.
8 loyalty.
Search for any number of dragons, put them on the battlefield, then shuffle your library.
Okay, so that ultimate sounds
It's
incredible.
Really good. Like, if you can ultimate that is actually going to win you the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Deck. But the issue is, are you going to ultimate it? And this is the big thing I have with Planeswalkers. Is like, so many people will be like, if I ultimate this Planeswalker, I'm going to win. And it's like, cool. If you have the capacity to ultimate a Planeswalker, you've already won.
That means, essentially, you've got a board state that can defend that Planeswalker comfortably.
Yeah.
And you have 5 turns.
Yeah.
Because what's Sarkhan? It comes in at 4.
Sarkhan comes in with 4 loyalty, you need 8.
So you need
uptick
4 turns,
times,
essentially.
5.
5 turns, because you do it on the 5th turn.
Uptick 4 times and then do the 5th turn,
So, okay, you're basically saying, I win the game in 5 turns with these blockers. Maybe you should swing with those blockers. I think you'd probably kill people with those dragons you've already got.
Yeah, you're playing a dragons deck.
Yes.
You have like the most capacity to get through to people of anyone you've ever seen in your life.
Yikes.
Yeah, so this I think is like a classic win more card. Again, like we just described. If you have the capacity to defend a Planeswalker, this particular Planeswalker for 5 turns in order to ultimate it, and you have 5 turns, by the way, in which you're not losing the game because someone's popping off in some capacity. Yeah, you're winning. You've already won.
Yeah, that is a win more card. I think that, like, we refer to Planeswalkers in specific ways as well when we talk about deck building capacity. We've referred to Planeswalkers as sorceries before.
Yeah.
Because in Commander, you've got 3 opponents, which... By the way, if you play a Planeswalker, they're a powerful card type. They're rare for a very good reason. The effects that they can have on a game are very strong. But when you have 3 opponents that realize you have a Planeswalker that can do powerful things, they're going to kill it. They're going to swing at it and get rid of it. So when you think about putting a Planeswalker in your deck, think about it as a sorcery spell, and whatever ability it can activate the turn it comes in.
So not the ultimate, the uptick or the downtick usually.
Yeah, think about that as the absolute ceiling as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, and would you put that in your deck if it was a sorcery that said that? So like, we talked about, I think Garruk Primal Hunter, or Garruk Wild Hunter or something it's called.
And that does like a Life's Legacy
it's like
type.
a 5-mana Planeswalker. You can either downtick to make a 3/3 worm, I think, for 5, so that's okay. Or you can uptick to make a worm, downtick and it kills him, so it removes all loyalty from him. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or something like that.
That's not a bad sorcery spell if your deck is all about big creatures.
No, I play this in my Mowu deck because like half the time Mowu is at least 10 power, sometimes like 15 or 20. 5-mana sorcery that says draw 20 cards. That's great in that deck.
Really, really good.
But yeah, I'd never think about the possibility of being like, oh, I might make 3 worms and then downtick. It's like, no, it's not going to happen. It's a sorcery spell.
Yeah, I can't even remember what his ultimate is. I don't think I've ever
Maybe
used...
he doesn't have an ultimate. Maybe it's just that
No,
downtick.
I think there is a downtick of 7 on that card.
Oh, right.
I've
never done it, so I'll say that.
Yeah, maybe in the Thrifty Interlude we'll have a look and we'll see if it's any good.
Look it up, yeah. I have another Planeswalker here that's also, I think, don't play it. It's Winmore. Tamiyo Field Researcher. This is the Bant one, so 1 green, white, blue for a Planeswalker Tamiyo. Enters with 4 loyalty. You can uptick by 1, choose up to 2 target creatures until your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage, you draw a card. It's not terrible. But you might draw 2 cards for 5 mana. Might, by the way.
Yeah.
Not sure about that one.
Interesting.
Downtick by 2 loyalty. Tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. This seems pretty bad for 5 mana.
Yeah, especially in Commander. I will say, like, in 1v1 formats, tapping something down for a turn can be really strong.
Especially on a Planeswalker, because you can tap their attackers, right?
And
then
keep
they can't
them
attack
tapped
you.
down. Yeah, this is really good in 1v1. But again, Commander, you have 3 opponents.
Yeah.
They're all going to want to get rid of this Planeswalker.
Yeah.
What's the ultimate here?
The ultimate is draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with, you may cast non-land cards from your hand without paying their mana costs. You'd have to downtick by 7 loyalty. So in this case, starts with 4. You have to uptick 1, 2, 3 times, then downtick. That's 4 turns you would need to have Tamiyo around. And you do admittedly get Omniscience, the card. Look, I see the appeal of this card in Planeswalker decks that have like Doubling Season or Deep Glow Skates.
That makes a lot, because it comes in with 8 and then you can downtick it.
Yeah, so you would get the ultimate straight away. Yeah. That seems gas, but this should not be in like 15 to 20% of the decks that it's legal in.
Was this really 15 to 20%?
Something like that. It was far higher than it should be, is all I remember.
That is an insane high, because like I'm thinking like as the uptick, right? If you're upticking to get a card draw trigger because you've got unblockable creatures.
Yeah.
If you're playing with unblockable creatures, put those creatures to better use. Run a Fallen Shinobi that can be ninjutsu'd in and cast spells for free anyway. That's doing what Tamiyo does, but way quicker. Like,
yeah, or even play like Kiora's, what's it called? Kiora's Trident? Biden of Thassa.
That makes, that's really interesting.
That's a permanent that sits on the battlefield and says whenever you deal combat damage to a player, draw a card.
There's also millions of these effects as well. There's Reconnaissance Mission.
Yeah, Reconnaissance, the original card as well. Yeah. There's like a couple more that I'm not thinking of at the top of my head. But there's a lot of versions of that effect that do it every time you deal combat damage.
All right, I see what you're saying about Planeswalkers. They are, without a shadow of a doubt, win more cards. Because like you're saying to yourself, if I get this incredible board state and I get that ultimate, I'll win. If you have that, you're winning. Yeah. Like, don't worry about it.
Straight up. Now I'm interested. Do you think me and you are guilty of playing win more cards?
Yes.
I think so.
I don't need to... look, we're not claiming to be the best Commander deck builders on the interwebs.
No.
Without a shadow of a doubt. I think also the other thing is win more cards generally are cards that we really like, because they have this like really weird effect, or they do something we really like to do, and we just want to see it happen in a game. And like from like a personal standpoint, when you're building a deck, you're like, oh, I really want to see this happen, or like something like that. But yeah, we're guilty of this.
I think so. I'd like to call out a couple of yours, if I may.
Oh, I had some examples in my own brain. But if you want to call me out, what's a win more card? Go on, Walt. Tell me what I'm doing in my decks that you think is win more.
This first one I know you're going to cut, I think, because you realize it doesn't work at instant speed. Wizard Spellbook in your Tornos deck.
Yeah, I tried to activate this at instant speed like a couple of weeks ago, and you were like,
sorry,
as a sorcery.
Sorcery speed.
It's made it so much worse.
Yeah.
Wizard Spellbook is like a really ridiculously high artifact. It's like 5 blue and a blue.
Yeah.
And it has this really bizarre ability where you tap and exile an instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, and then you roll a d20.
Mm-hmm.
And the d20 result means that I think it's like 1 to 9, you can copy the card and then you can cast the copy, but you still have to pay its cost.
Yeah, so you're basically just flashing it back at that point.
Yeah, and then 10 to 19, because I know 20 is casting it for free.
Yeah.
And 10 to 19 is like you can cast it, but instead you pay 1 generic mana to cast it.
Which is pretty good.
It's pretty amazing. So, but like in this situation, if I've got the turn, and like if we think back to the questions we were asking ourselves earlier, if I've got 7 mana on my turn to play this sorcery speed flashback a thing possibly for free, I should be using that mana for something else. And also, considering you can only activate it at sorcery speed, has made this card so less appealing in my mind. Because I used to think of it as like, oh, this would be great if someone has a counter spell in their graveyard or a removal spell in their graveyard.
It would be a really cool response, right? Like,
yes.
And I think it would be totally fair. You'd have to leave the mana up to cast the spell because you don't know for sure you're going to get it for free.
Yeah, well, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of... Like, you've got a 1 in... Well, no, you've got a 1 in 20 chance of casting it for free.
Yeah.
A, like, maybe...
Roughly
50% chance of casting it for 1, but then 50-50 chance of casting it for its full price.
Yeah, but like if you just had the mana up anyway, you know, like in your Tornos deck, for instance, you often do just like leave your mana open because you've got a bunch of mana outlets and things you can activate at instant speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would be really good. But the fact that it's sorcery speed, it's a classic example of like, in order for all these things to be happening where it becomes really, really good, you're already winning, right? Yeah.
And I think, it's definitely... I did some upgrades to my Tornos deck recently, and I'm now struggling to remember if I've already taken it out or if I kept it in because I just want to see it work once.
Just one time?
Just one time. I want someone to have, like, I don't know, like
Rise of the Dark Realm.
Yeah, something stupid in their graveyard that I can be like, well, bam, I cast this for free.
Yeah, would be good.
When you were saying about in our decks, I actually have one card that comes to mind because it's a deck I'm looking at reconstructing pretty heavily soon, which is my Phylaf deck.
Yeah.
It's a card called Leisure the Tangle. It's 6 green for an 8/8 elemental with trample.
Okay, 8 mana, 8/8, yeah.
With trample as well, it's pretty good. The artwork is also goofy as hell on it. It's got this like weird...
Oh, that is
like,
fun.
Like, it kind of looks like he's wearing a ghillie suit.
It looks like a man.
Yeah, it does look like a man plant. It's bizarre.
Mant.
But whenever Leisure the Tangle deals combat damage to a player, this is the weird bit. You can choose any number of target lands you control and put an awakening counter on each of those lands. Those lands are 8/8 elemental creature tokens for as long as they have an awakening counter. Now, I loved the idea of having an army of lands, because I've got a couple of different cards that turn my lands into creatures, like Sylvan Awakening, for example, turns them all into 2/2s to end a turn.
Yeah.
I just love the idea of having a huge board of lands and swinging, killing people with lands. I love that idea.
Yeah.
This card was one of the ways to make them huge on a single turn. But I personally believe if I've got 8 mana to cast an 8/8 with trample and get that card to hit someone on my turn, I should be winning in other ways.
Yeah. You have to get an 8/8 trampler through to somebody. So at that point, you probably have the best board state, right?
Yeah.
Like strong chance you're in the lead already. And then, we were talking about before we hit record, actually, that this card is like when you... if someone casts a board wipe, you just
screwed.
like lose your lands.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. When you do deal down, and I've done it before where I've dealt damage with Leisure the Tangle and going, right, I can now choose any number of lands to become creatures.
Yeah.
What's the chance that someone has like a Doomsday in hand or like a Destroy All Creatures?
Or something, yeah.
I'm really walking the line here.
Yeah, it's a risky one for sure.
All right, well, what do you think is a win more card in one of your decks? Because I know you're incredibly like... very critical of cards when you're building decks.
Oh yeah, I'm very quick to take cards out, and honestly, this is one that I've only just put in, and I'm already like, maybe I should take it out. So there you go.
Already critical.
So it's in my Bant Enchantments deck, which I call Bant Chantmants.
Bant Chantmants.
It's Heavenly Blade Master. For 5 and a white, you get a 3/6 with flying and double strike.
Sure.
When it enters the battlefield, you may attach any number of auras and equipment you control to it. And other creatures you control get +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to Heavenly Blade Master.
Oh my god, what a lightning bolt for removal as well.
The upside is so high, right?
Yeah.
Like you if you have like, 10 auras or whatever.
Like across a couple of creatures.
Yeah, across a couple of creatures. She ETBs, you put them all on Heavenly Blade Master. Creatures you control get +10/+10. And she's a flying double strike creature. So like if she's just got 20 power, she's probably just going to kill someone, right? Like swing 20/20 in double strike.
Gone.
Yeah, gone. But the problem is, and this is like the classic, the questions we run through before. What do you need in order for this to work? You need to have a bunch of auras already on creatures, but also you don't want to give, you want like surplus, because you don't want to give all your auras to Heavenly Blade Master. It's too risky, right?
No, because that's, again, like I said, lightning bolt for removal.
Yeah.
She gets removed. You've now made your board state worse.
Yeah, straight up. So you basically want to have, 15 auras. So you can put 5 on her and leave 10 everywhere else.
In your aura-based enchantment list, where that's the board state that you need to win the game.
Yeah.
You're already winning.
You're already winning. And also, how big are those creatures if you have 10 auras on them already? You know what I mean? You probably got a 30/30 on the field.
Citizen's Champion is 100 by now.
Exactly. So my experience with this card is by the time it's good, I'm already winning. So it's win more.
I think we've covered what a win more card is pretty effectively in this first half. But should we take a thrifty interlude?
Let's take a thrifty interlude. Let's do it. So we've got lots of stuff to cover, obviously, including what we're going to put in our decks to avoid those win mores. So what we can substitute for those win more cards. But before that, let's hear a little something about a thrifty card. So as is tradition, I will be performing a monologue. And this week, the card is brought to life in monologue form from the perspective of someone who knows about this idea.
Who knows about this idea?
Yeah,
so it's not the cowed merchant that we're used to selling us the card.
No, and it's also not someone in the art, which I've done a couple of times recently. This is someone who's aware of what the card describes. It'll make more sense when you hear what the card is.
Interesting.
Do you want to read the card that will be featuring this
I
week?
sure do. I actually recently just traded this card to my partner because they're building a Golgari deck, and it's definitely outside of their colors. And I believe that this card goes in nearly every Golgari deck.
It's so good.
Brilliant. Good. It's Binding of the Old Gods. For 2 black and a green, you'll get an enchantment saga. And for those that don't know, when a saga enters the battlefield and after your draw step, you add a lore counter to it. And each lore counter has a chapter that describes an effect. And then for this one, it has 3. So once it gets the 3rd lore counter, you sacrifice it. So the first chapter is destroy target non-land permanent opponent controls. Second chapter, search your library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Chapter 3, creatures you control gain death touch until end of turn.
That's not what the old gods were for, young Gromit. Don't they teach you anything in those newfangled institutions? Institutions, that's what they always call themselves these days. What was so wrong with being called a school? In China, they've all got numbers. That would be much simpler. Oh yes, the old gods. No, these gods weren't so clean and sanitary and white, all painted up on the walls of the chapel in little ballerina poses with roses in their hair and pouting little puckered lips. Our old gods were filthy and angry and fond of a little hanky-panky like the rest of us, till they sealed them all up and tucked them away. They're still with us, you know, in the dark of the night when you're fast asleep. You can see them in the pits of darkness behind the pub, and the silence of a bat taking flight. But most of all, you can see him in your nightmares. I see him every day, at the corner of my eyes. I'll join him someday soon. I'll be lying in me bed, in the silence and the black of night, and they'll creep up close to me. I won't hear a fin. Right when I'm not ready for them, they'll reach out and grab me and make me piss my bed. Hey! Don't you walk away from me! I'm telling you, that's how the bed gets all wet! Get budgeted! 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 Budgeted!
Alright, I'm understanding what you mean here. This is someone that is aware of the Binding of the Old Gods.
Yes, as a concept.
Yes.
In that it's his excuse for pissing himself.
Because, no, it's not his uncontrollable bladder. It's the old gods that are scaring
Yeah, it's
him.
his fault.
Nah, that makes sense.
Look, you can catch these text posts as they're written every Thursday on our Discord server in the Thrifty Thursdays channel. The Discord server is linked in the show notes. And you can see us bring some of these to life in video form over on TikTok at Get Commanded. So follow us on there to see those as they come out.
Yeah, and while we were in that thrifty interlude, I did actually look up Garuk Primal Hunger to find out what his ultimate was. So yeah, we were pretty close. He upticks to create a 3/3 beast creature token, which you said worm, but it is a beast. But weirdly that you remembered the worm, because his downtick of 6 is create a 6/6 green worm creature for each land you control.
Right.
So
that's the one you never activate, really. Like you're never going to get there.
That.
But the downtick of 3, I think, which kills him on the spot, is the draw cards. You've got the greatest power among non-creatures, non-human creatures you control.
Exactly right.
Which is worth it as a sorcery.
100%.
Like, there are sorceries that do that, and they're fine.
And they're really good, actually.
Yeah, they're really good. So we should get back to these win more cards. So... specifically, we're moving away from win more cards, actually, and moving into the cards that will actually help us to win more. And I realize how much of a paradox that is.
Yeah, that's a bit of an oxymoron.
Yes.
But the Space Commanders did say we should remove win more cards and replace them with, like, better effects or more synergistic pieces.
Yeah. So, the first example of a card that I think, like, in terms of going like for like, when you substitute a win more card out of your deck, it is going to be enhancers, like we spoke about earlier in the episode. So as we said, they can catapult you into the lead if you have a little bit of a setup, but they don't require that we're already in the winning position before they work.
I think we should probably go through maybe like some archetypes of decks and see what like an enhancer in each archetype would be to like counteract a card that you've identified. Now that you can identify a win more card and you're going, right, I'm going to take this out. What's the card that I should replace?
Yeah. So I think a good example of an enhancer is like proliferate effects in decks that care about it. So your charge counters deck is a good example of a deck that likes proliferate. My Moru Loyal Companion is a green +1 counters deck.
Yeah.
So a card like Evolution Sage, this is the landfall proliferate basically card. So whenever you play a land, proliferate.
Yep. And if you're not playing green, you could play Flux Channeler, which is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you proliferate.
I love the weird cycle that those two cards make and then are not continued.
And it's also like the complete, like you're playing the green one, I'm playing the blue one. Completely different strategies of decks. But if you want to proliferate counters, these are both great enhancers. But yeah, these both say that you're going to like speed up the +1 counters or the charge counter thing that you're doing, but it's not a card that does absolutely, you know, nothing on its own or
like if you're already winning, you know, that these will they could feel like a win more card if you're already winning, but also importantly, if you're not winning yet but you're sort of close, these might get you over the line.
Yeah, I think the difference here is like an Evolution Sage on a board state that has a couple of creatures with +1 counters on it gets you closer to winning.
Yeah.
A win more card in a proliferate strategy needs a board state where those creatures already have 10 +1 counters each on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you see what like the difference here is, like helping us get there, or it comes... You know what it is? A win more card is America in World War II.
Right when the fighting's over, just swoops on in.
That's a really... For any history nerds, there you go.
Probably a contentious one to say as well, because some people might be like, actually, America swooped in and saved the day. Or
there is a lot of arguments.
We don't know about that one.
But I've seen a lot of memes of people being like, America.
Yeah, right when the fight's over, America rocks up. Yeah, I see what you mean.
For any American listeners, sorry.
We're sorry. Yeah. We're very far away. We're a full ocean away from you.
You did help us during the war.
Yeah, so thank you.
All right, what are some other archetypes that we should think about? Some enhancers in?
I think like the quintessential enhancer for me in a like spells deck, and specifically a deck that wants to copy spells, Twinning Staff.
Yeah,
this
sick card.
Was actually, I think, only printed in the Commander 2020 pre-con. It might have been reprinted now in Commander Legends or something.
Possibly. This was in the Calamax pre-con, right?
Yeah, great in a Calamax deck. Super if you have that pre-con, leave it in there. But I have this in my Wart the Raid Mother deck because Wart copies spells by conspiring. So you tap untapped creatures to copy spells. But yeah, basically, if you know you're going to be copying spells already, Twinning Staff just says, if you would copy a spell, copy it that many times +1 instead. So yeah, if you have a deck that's built around already copying stuff, certainly if your commander has the ability to copy spells already, Twinning Staff is just going to say, cool, when I'm doing the thing my deck wants to do already, this is going to enhance that, make it a little bit better.
Yeah, but you don't want too many of these effects, because if you fill your deck with effects that say copy spells more times, you're going to run out of spells to copy in the first place.
Well, and run out of ways to copy the spell as well.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, I think that Twinning Staff is a great example of this. Something that we were talking about a lot, literally just during the Thrifty Interlude when we took a break there, was tap abilities on creatures and how to make that way better by untapping the creature that has the tap ability.
Yeah,
so
there's a few different ways to do this. There's my favorite card, Twiddle, obviously.
Yeah,
the 1 mana instant, tap or untap target artifact, creature or land.
We got to get in touch with Wizards of the Coast to make a secret lair of Twiddle. That's gotta happen. But yeah, like, so for example, you've got your Arami deck. I've got a Tornos deck, both of which have commanders with a tap ability.
Yeah, you're going to be using them.
And are so much better, like literally twice as good, if you can tap it again. So cards like Patriarch's Seal
I love this card.
It's also like the perfect example, because we say it's a ramp spell. It taps for a mana of any color. It's a 3 mana ramp spell. Now, we usually say don't play a 3 mana ramp spell that only taps for 1 mana.
Yeah.
But this has an extra ability that says pay 1 and tap Patriarch's Seal and untap target legendary creature you control.
Yeah.
That is enough of a reason to run this 3 mana rock.
It's so good because it will help you no matter what, right?
Yes.
Like, this is the thing about the 3 mana rock, is like it's an inefficient rock, but it's a really efficient untap ability. So no matter what, you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, and if you've got more money to spend, you could get Manamo School at Water's Edge.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great shout. Twiddle is a good shout. You could also run the Kelpie Guide from Strixhaven.
Yeah.
It's really, really sick.
There's also a one that I haven't seen discussed as an untap ability until someone said this the other day, and I was like, wow, I didn't read it like that, because it doesn't read like that at all. Sting from the Lord of the Rings set, the equipment, the sword.
Yeah.
So it's like a 2
It
mana
doesn't have that
equipment.
like a goblin or orc.
Yeah, so it's got all this text on it that doesn't matter, which is why it distracts you. But it's like a 2 mana artifact. It gives +1/+1 and haste, I think.
It's not bad.
It equips for 1, but also it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, untap the equipped creature.
I have a copy of Sting.
Right. It's like, it
It
reads so much like it wants to go in an equipment deck. Like, it's giving haste, it's giving a buff, it's making orcs and goblins not block. But people are missing like the middle line of text, which just says at every turn untap the creature for 1 mana. And it gives it haste too. So like I've got an Arami deck. If I equip it to Arami, it says pay a generic mana, equip it to Arami. Arami can tap with haste.
Yep.
And then move to combat, untap Arami, do it again.
That's so cool.
Really cool.
Wow. I literally have one of these in my binder, which I ignored because it has so much text on it. And I was like, it's Sting. It's not going to synergize with anything I have.
Yeah,
this is for a little halfling. I don't run halfling decks.
Right, it's a bit slept on for sure. In a recent deck that I built, my enchantment deck, my Banchantment deck, already come up in this this episode already. I really like Heliod the Radiant Dawn.
This is the Phyrexianized Heliod, right? This is sick. I think this card is really cool.
It's really sweet. It's like, it costs a lot of mana, but the upside's so good. So basically, for 2 white, you're going to get a god that enters the battlefield, and it returns target non-god enchantment creature from your graveyard, enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So it gets anything back except a god, which makes sense. It doesn't want to go infinite with itself.
Which is actually pretty good, because like, if that's the absolute lowest you're getting it for, you get the best graveyard. You get the best thing in your graveyard back to hand. Seems pretty good for 4 mana.
It's also an enchantment, so it's going to trigger your Enchantress effects of drawing cards, that kind of thing. But importantly, for 3 and then a Phyrexian blue mana, so you can either pay 2 life or a blue, you can transform Heliod. On his backside, he's the Phyrexianized one that you're referring to.
And he's super cool looking in the art. He's
really cool
terrifying.
Art. Really spooky. But he says, you may cast spells as though they had flash. Already cool.
So it's a Vidalcan Orrery on the back.
It is. It also says, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn.
Weird ability, but it basically says the worst that backside of that card could be is your spells cost 1 less because
And they have flash.
And they have flash.
Which is so sweet.
That's
but
pretty
also,
sick.
the upside is so much higher than that. Because, like, how often in a Commander game do people draw cards? So much of the time.
All the time.
So it's like, someone could be drawing cards and, like, drawing 3 cards, and it's like, cool, everything I in my hand has flash, costs 3 less. This is a great example of an enhancer. Also, kind of a ramp piece, but mostly it's the flash thing.
It's also incredible, specifically in an enchantment list like yours, because enchantments do not work at flash speed. Like,
No,
it's
very
very rare
rare.
to get them out and very responsive. Most of the time, if you're playing an enchantment deck, you're doing everything on your turn and hoping your board state stays the same by your turn. This is a way that your deck can now work at instant speed and keep playing during your opponent's turns.
Yeah.
I also want to see someone build this as a commander. I do know
I
that
think it'd be cool.
Jordan, who listens to the podcast and plays in our community, has built this as a kind of trial, very low tier CDH list.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. It didn't quite get to what it wanted to do just because it was so much mana to get to the backside of Heliod.
Maybe not quite CDH playable, but could be really powerful. For
very
sure.
interesting and casual.
Yeah, I think it is a classic example of one of those decks that looks like it could be really interesting. This is not a call out of Jordan, this is a call out of decks that I look at and go like, maybe I should build that. And then you realize how it wants to be built. So in this case, makes, like, let's say you cast a Windfall, everything costs 21 less. You're like, oh my god, what can I do with that? And it's like, what every other deck that makes things cost generic mana less does. Eldrazi.
Yeah.
The answer every single time is just play big Eldrazi spells. And it's like, it's cool, but also like Krufix decks are Eldrazi decks. And so, what's the Rakdos one? Rakdos Lord of Riots.
That's a lot of Eldrazi.
It's an Eldrazi
lists,
deck.
yeah.
There's so many decks that like look like they could do something really cool, and then it's like, nope, it's just Eldrazi again.
I'm wondering whether or not there's like a way to build this as like a big board kind of scenario, because there's a lot of like, you know, like deploy to the front, for example. You could
That
just
could be
make a
fun.
bunch of soldiers.
That would be a
big
fun
X
spell. Maybe like
Yeah.
a big X spells Heliod. That would be pretty interesting.
Azorius X spells.
That could be cool.
I reckon this
kinda
is
like
possible.
that,
If you want to build this, send us the list. Let us know how it goes.
Definitely. So that's obviously one way we can substitute cards that are feeling that, you know, they're feeling
card.
Win-more-ish.
Yeah.
So we can substitute for enhancers. That's going to work a lot. But the other thing that we're going to be able to substitute in is cards that are just win cons. Not win more, win cons. So
Yes, actually winning us the game once we resolve it.
yeah, so not cards that are pushing us from winning to winning, cards that are pushing us from, again, almost being there, but just like resolving the spell just says, okay, now I win.
Yep.
So like I've been really fond of this card in the few decks I've played in recently as kind of like a pseudo overrun effect. True Conviction. This is the enchantment for 3 white. So it sits on the battlefield, which is really cool. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink.
It's very strong.
It's so strong. In any sort of go wide deck, it just means you like don't care about throwing away your creatures because it's like, well, they're going to deal shitloads of damage. Half the time they're not going to be blocked.
Yeah.
Because their first strike damage will kill the blocker, and you're just going to gain like 1,000,000 life. It's so sweet.
It's incredible. In any go wide deck, any kind of overwhelming stampede, overrun, these are all cards that actually are going to win you and seal you the win once you've got the board state ready. A win more card is just going to get you closer to it, but like not over the edge of it. It's
Or like get you from, like you're already winning. Like let's say you have True Conviction on the battlefield and you have enough power to just kill everyone, and then you play like 1,000-Year Storm, you know?
Yes, like,
and it's
what?
like, well, you already had us. Like just stop there, you know?
Swing your creatures and
It's
we'll die.
over, yeah.
But I guess in other like deck archetypes, like in a graveyard-based strategy, like Rise of the Dark Realms is a card that says, if I'm milling out all my opponents and I'm milling myself out and I've got like Gary, Grey Merchant of Asphodel in the bin, I'm going to win the game if this spell resolves. So it's not a win more card. It's a, this resolves, the game's mine.
Yeah, it just reanimates everyone's graveyard, right? Rise of the Dark Realms. Yeah, every card in every graveyard becomes yours.
Yeah.
It's so easy to reach a critical mass with this deck. Even if you're not milling your opponents, if you just have like 30 creatures in your bin because you're playing like a mill kind of strategy
And
of
one
yourself,
of them's Gary.
and one of them's Gary, it's like, I just win.
Yeah.
Or just like, even if you have an Aristocrats deck, and this is actually, I don't play Rise of the Dark Realms, but I play Command the Dreadhorde.
Which is like Rise of the Dark Realms on a budget.
Yeah, because it deals a bunch of damage to you instead. But it costs less mana, so it's like a bit of a trade-off. But there's so much of the time in my Aristocrats deck, just having a sack outlet and an Aristocrat that says, you know, when a creature you control dies, target opponent loses life, you gain a life.
If you reanimate your whole board and then sack your board with the aristocrat,
it often just says I win. Yeah,
that's pretty good.
For sure. I want to shout out a weird, like speaking of sort of overrun effects,
Sure.
but for life gain decks, this deck card was only printed in a pre-con, so it might be hard to pick up, but it's really sweet. Blossoming Bog Beast.
We were looking at this like not too long ago.
Yeah.
I have not seen this card at all
It should
on a
be played
table.
more.
And I think it's incredible.
It's so cool. So for 4 and a green, you get a creature. I'm going to forget its stats. It doesn't matter.
I think it's a 3/3. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's effectively a 5/5 for 5.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of combat on your turn, you gain 2 life. Then creatures you control get +X and trample until end of turn, where X is the amount of life you've gained this turn. So at its base, it says every one of your combats, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample till end of turn. But in any amount of life gained more than that, like if you gain 5 life in your pre-combat main phase,
7+7+7 and trample, wild.
this just ends games.
This is
100%.
insanity.
It's so strong.
I thought as well, is this at the beginning of combat trigger?
I think it's when at beginning of your combat. So it won't make your like blocks really
No,
good.
but I'm thinking if you get multiple combat steps.
Oh yeah, I mean that would also do
Oh
it.
my lord, that's so cool. Like
Yeah.
Morag, Fury of a Coon.
Oh, yeah,
and then
that
it
would
would
be
gain 2 life.
Oh, and then
wow.
+6/+6.
But also the +1
12
+0 from... This is a
it
cool
would stack.
combo.
That's fun. That's very fun.
Insanity. Well, look, in other archetypes as well, if you got like big spells and you're casting like huge burn spells for your win, if you've listened to our recent Spellslinger archetype, even you're going for that big spell win, Crackle with Power is a card that I think is not included in enough decks that can generate a ton of mana.
Yeah.
This is the XXX red.
Red.
I think it's double red.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
because
double
at
red.
minimum it's 5 mana
Yes.
for X equaling 1.
Yeah.
But it basically says it deals 3 times.
5 times.
5 times?
Yeah.
See, this card is slept on. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. 5 times X to X different targets.
Yes. So the base here is you pay 5 because you pay 1 generic
Yeah.
into each of X because you have to pay the same with all of them.
And it will deal 5 to 1 target.
So that's pretty bad. But if you can stack it up a little bit higher, so if we get up to 8, then it's going to be dealing 10 damage to 2 targets. That's pretty good. But
Yep.
the really, really good spot you want to be at is 11, where you're paying X equal to 3, and it's dealing 15 to 3 targets.
Yeah,
So,
that's killing your opponents.
yeah, if you can copy that spell 1 time, that's 30 to each of your opponents. That's probably the end of the game.
Even at like, paying X equals 2 and copying it once is pretty insane.
Yeah, deal 10 to 2 things. Like if you can copy that's like 20 to 1 opponent, 10 to the other 2. That
Yeah,
might win the game.
That might win the game as well. I
Yeah.
just think, because we could talk about Comet Storm. We've
Yeah.
talked about Jai's Immolating Inferno.
Yeah.
This is another version of that effect that
Yeah.
people aren't playing at the moment.
For sure. I would like to shout out actually some of the win cons in your weird, Sultai Voltron deck.
Oh, you're talking about
Ukima and Kazoo. Yeah,
Yeah.
so many weird cards in here. But mostly they're ones that, there's 2 sort of categories you have here. One is buffs by a lot, because
Yep.
then when Ukima leaves the battlefield, it's going to do a lot. Colossification is pretty hilarious in this list.
Insane. So for those that don't know my Ukima list, it's a very weird commander. It's a whaleable, firstly. Best creature type ever in Magic.
So good.
When it leaves the battlefield, so doesn't have to die, could be bounced to hand, exiled, whatever. When it leaves, it deals, or target opponent loses X life where X is Ukima's power, and you gain X life.
Yeah.
So the whole point of the deck is suit Ukima up with a bunch of really powerful swords or something like that, and then have it bounce to hand or sacrifice it.
It's also unblockable. So if you just
Commander
deal combat damage to people, like if you just swing a 21 at someone, they can't block it.
Someone is dead.
Someone's
so
dead.
if I get Colossification on Ukima, because Ukima says it's unblockable already,
Yeah.
as long as it gets back round to my turn and I can swing with it, I have someone dead.
Because its classification gives +20/+20.
And
right?
Ukima's a 2/2.
Yeah, so it's enough.
Dead.
It's definitely
Dead.
enough. I also really like, and I've seen you get this up a couple of times recently. Again, it works so well because you have an unblockable commander.
Yeah.
Vorpal Sword.
It's so hard to get off color intensity-wise.
It's a very, very tricky card to win with regardless. I think this is the right deck for it because Ukima is unblockable, but basically has a bunch of text on it. The most important one is you can pay 5 black. I think 8 mana.
8 mana.
The next time...
3 of which is black in a 3-color deck. It's
tough.
actually so... And the equip cost is 2 black as well. It's not 2 generic, it's 2 black.
That's tough. But then if you pay the 8, I think until end of turn, the creature gets, when it deals combat damage to a player, they lose the game.
It's
just
player
straight up.
death touch, basically. Yeah,
they just straight up die. And it's like unblockable again, so it works.
They are 2 cards that are in the deck for those emergency situations where I need to kill a player kind of immediately.
Yeah.
I have decided to leave them in the deck. I just highlight them in Rule Zero conversations that they're kind of instant kill cards.
Yeah.
But I think shouting these out is totally fair. They're a Voltron strategy that can go in a lot of different Voltron decks, but they're not win more. They win the game.
Yeah,
like, if
the game just ends.
Yeah, you are using Vorpal Sword to kill a player. It's not like, it's not like I'm saying with Ukima as a 2/2, I've got a board state that's guaranteed killing that player. No way in hell, but if I use Vorpal Sword, that's giving me a board state that can kill a player.
Yeah. Well, the win more here would be like if you had Colossification and then you Vorpal Sorted, then Vorpal Sorted would be that win more card. But yeah, neither of these cards on their own are a win more card because they do just on their own with your commander just end the game.
Yeah, I think a win more card in my Ukima list would be like, I don't know, like double the amount of +1 counters on a creature.
Yeah.
That would be a win more card. If I've already got a critical mass of +1 counters on Ukima, I don't need to double them. No. I can sacrifice it, do something with them, or...
It's unblockable. It's going to get through anyway. Yeah, for sure. I think if you can't find the right cards to substitute for your win more cards, so there's not the right enhancer, there's not the right win con card for them, I think just play more of the essentials, right?
Oh, card draw removal, cards that
work on their own. I think that would be the best way to go.
And I would, if I can make an argument here, just chuck more card draw in because you'll find your win con cards more often.
It's true.
I think if you're playing win more cards and you've not substituted in win con cards, put more card draw in instead and you'll find your win con more often.
I agree. Well, we all love spells that completely take over the game, but these spells aren't always necessary for your victory. In most decks, you will be better served with a spell that slows down your opponents, rockets you into the lead, or just straight up ends the game. Win more can be tricky to put your finger on in Commander, but mastering this will really take your decks to the next level. So, Space Commanders, command received!
I like this episode. This is a very typical Get Commanded, hey, build your decks with winning the game in mind.
Said it a few times in different ways.
Yeah, I think it's important, at least 10, 15 of our episodes have been win the game.
The Space Commanders feel strongly about it, I think. Well, to the listeners out there, do you feel commanded? What do you think of win more cards? And I want to hear if there's any that you think you're guilty of playing in your decks. Like, have a really good look through your list. I reckon you'll be able to find a few that are win more cards.
For sure. And look, like we said at the start of this episode, we actually are wanting to hear from you guys. The Space Commanders have let us know that there's a Q&A episode command coming up soon. So if you have any questions for us, send them through. And honestly, like Walt and I are very open to answering questions outside the world of Magic, about us, about our hobbies. If we've planeswalked to Star Wars a bunch of times. If you want to talk to us about Star Wars, ask us about that. But yeah, you can get in touch with us plenty of different ways. You can send us a tweet on Twitter, send us an email, join the Discord is the best place to chat with Walt and I directly and with other members of our play group, which we talk about on the podcast all the time. Yeah,
definitely. And if you have the time, we'd love if you could leave us a review on whichever platform you listen to this podcast on. So specifically Spotify or Apple Podcasts are the ones. Google Podcasts, they suck. So if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just go to our podcast page and leave us a review. It would really help us out a lot.
For sure. And look, if you want to support what Walt and I are doing, which after Command Fest just recently, I found out that you guys really would like to see Walt and I making more content or potentially video content.
Yeah.
If you want to make this happen, you can help Walt and I get to setting up a studio with a camera and all that kind of stuff by supporting us directly through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast to support us. But we would like to thank our patron Stella Tam and a very special shout out to Fletcher Cutting for supporting us in the Space Commander tier. You are the best, Fletch.
It's true. And we'd also like to say thank you to Palms Off Gaming, who sponsored this podcast. They make some really fantastic deck boxes, sleeves, binders, and other gaming accessories that me and James use frequently,
yes,
actually.
I just replaced my Niv Mizzet composite deck box that I've had for a very long time with a Genesis deck box from Palms Off Gaming. It's so strong, you can actually stand on the deck box and it won't break. It's wild.
We had someone from Palms Off like show us how strong it was, and it's like it's something else. I've also swapped it into. I've got a pink deck box that I've got. A special project actually is going to go into that box, which I'll be updating everybody on a bit later. But it's a really sweet box to put it all into. So you can check out Palms Off Gaming at palmsoffgaming.com.au.
Right.
We'd better planeswalk, I suppose.
Get
out of
here.
Magic into something else. I think it's your turn. Where are we planeswalking to?
Now, we've planeswalked to the realm of two-player video games a couple of times.
We have.
Because both of us live with our partners, and we're both huge nerds, and we play a lot of video games.
Our partners are huge nerds.
Exactly. So we've talked about like a bunch of different games. I found another one, which I'm going to recommend to both you and Electra to play as well.
Sure.
It's called Unravel. This is the second installment. It's called Unravel 2.
I think I've seen this, or I've had this recommended as like a game for couples a lot of time. I'm
so
assuming,
much fun.
is teamwork just like really important in the game?
Well, it's very on the nose that you have to work as a team because your characters are like little balls of yarn, basically. They're like little threads.
Oh, and they're
you're
attached,
connected.
right? I think I've seen a little bit of gameplay of this before.
It's really fun. You have to there's some puzzles, and also huge shout out to the design of this game. It is beautiful. It is, the art on it is just stunning. The forests and everything looks like you could reach into the screen and touch it. Everything moves in the background. The background's never static. Everything's blowing in the breeze. It's just a gorgeous game. But the puzzles are so much fun.
Right.
They're also very achievable, which is something that I really like about two-player games, is when you're working with your partner and both of you are understanding the puzzle at the same rate.
Right.
Because there are some two-player games which, it causes someone to throw a controller across the room, and it's like really dangerous. But yeah, these puzzles are like fun, interactive, pretty simple to solve, but it progresses the story. You're not stuck going, oh my God, how do we get through this bit?
You've got to think, but if you think about it, you can work it out.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I've been playing Breath of the Wild still, and I just beat the 4th Divine Beast.
Congratulations.
The big camel. Thank you.
That's definitely the hardest one as well.
Well, and it's because the puzzle is so unintuitive. All the other puzzles, I was like, I could get my head around how they worked. I just got
camel's
lost.
the one with like the twisting body, right? Yeah, I thought that was badly designed.
Line up the rail to like activate the electricity to make certain things work, but you can't see what's being activated. Anyway, I got there, but like it was a slog. So I'm glad to hear you're playing a game where like it feels like you can do it. Yeah.
And it's also it's something to say about like, little bite-sized achievements make you feel like you're really good at something, whereas one really big achievement can make you feel like you're terrible at the video game.
For sure.
But yeah, we've smashed through it. Theo and I are like already on the last level.
Oh, wow.
We've just played like 20 minutes, half an hour every night. It's a really fun game.
I have to pick up a copy on the Switch or something.
You can also customize the characters, which I think is super cute. You can like change the color of your yarn and then change the shape of the head. So like Theo's got this like really dark blue demon-headed one, and I've got this like pink, like cute little one running around.
The duality of man.
Exactly.
Well, that's all we have time for. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.